guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Georgia. I'm a knit and crochet designer, and today I'm going to show you how to make the beautiful loose crochet shorts. Now, I would say this pattern is suitable for advanced beginners into the intermediate kind of category. We do have an elasticated waistband, so we're going to have to put elastic into that waistband. The actual techniques themselves aren't that difficult. It's just like obviously chain, single crochet, half double crochet, slip stitches. You also need to know how to work in the round, but it really actually isn't that hard. So maybe if you're feeling brave and you might feel like this is a little bit of a step up to what you've done already, honestly give it a try, because all the information is going to be there for you and I'm going to show you all the steps. So give it a try. And if you do get stuck at all, just leave a comment down below and I'll get back to you. So I'm going to go through all the important stuff that you need to know. First of all, I'm going to leave the gauge on the screen for you. Please do a gauge swatch so that your shorts turn out the correct size. It can save you so much time in the long run, so it's really worth doing. Sorry if you can hear my cat eating in the background. I'm going to leave the yarn yardages on the screen for you as well. You're going to need a sport weight yarn. So this is the yarn that I use, and you need a cotton yarn as well. This is one of those cotton yarns that kind of like, it like separates. But you can kind of use whichever cotton yarn that you have on hand. Just make sure that it's the right weight. So this one recommends a 3mm crochet hook, and this is the colour Ivory. I'll also leave the sizing info on the screen for you, so have a look and see which one would be best for you. I personally am kind of in between sizes small and medium, but I went down a size because I really wanted to make sure that the shorts fitted and didn't fall down, because obviously you need them to be tight enough. There's a lot of room in the hips, so if you're not sure, I would probably size down. There is some more sizing info in the PDF pattern for you, which I'll leave linked down below, and that includes a schematic and a table and some other measurements and stuff like that. Don't forget to tag me once you've finished, or even progress photos of your shorts. I absolutely love to see them. Make sure you like the video if you do enjoy it, because that way I know what you guys want to see more of. Make sure you subscribe to stick around and see more tutorials from me. The other materials that you're going to need are going to be coming up on the next slide or so, but you will need the elastic, and you want 1 inch thick flat elastic. You're going to need a 3.5mm crochet hook, a measuring tape, a yarn needle and some scissors, and also 4 stitch markers. But without any more babbling, let's get crafting. So here is another little look at the yarn that I used, just in case you want to compare the label to something that you've got. And I've got my 3.5mm crochet hook. And then this is just a clip from later on in the video, but I wanted to show you an example of what the 1 inch thick flat elastic looks like, so that you can get some ready to do the waistband. As always, start off with a slip knot. We're going to get started on the waistband first, so we're going to make our beginning chain, and all sizes need to chain 24. Once you've got your chain, we're going to half double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook, so where my thumb is just pointing to there. So you yarn over and insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook. And then we're going to go into the next chain with the half double crochet, and in each of the chains along. And so when you finish this row, this is row 1, you will have 23 half double crochet stitches. Once you've completed row 1, you can chain 2 and turn your work. Now that beginning chain 2 counts as our first half double crochet stitch. So that means we're going to go into the next stitch with a half double crochet, so the one next to it. But we're going to go into the back loop only. So you can see just the backwards loop there is the only loop that I'm going into with a half double crochet. And then into the next stitch, into that back loop only, and going into the back loop just creates the ribbing effect. So you're going to do that for each stitch across, making sure you finish this row 2 with 23 half double crochet stitches. Remember, the beginning chain 2 counts as your first stitch. And I will show you how to finish this row as well, because it's really easy to miss off the last stitch, and if you do that multiple times you're going to end up with a really incorrect stitch count. So I'm still on row 2 and I'm just getting towards the end of my row here. So as I said, it's really easy to miss off the last stitch. Here it looks like I could be finished, but you actually have to do sometimes one more than what you think. It looks like I've gone too far, but actually I haven't. If you're unsure, you can just count your stitches, make sure you've got 23, including that beginning chain 2, and you're good. Then we're going to chain 2 and turn. Again, half double crochet in the back loop only into the next stitch and in each stitch across, making sure to keep 23 stitches on the row, and you're just going to repeat that multiple times. So chain 2, turn, half double crochet in the back loop only in each stitch across, making sure to keep 23 stitches in each row, and you're going to repeat that until your work measures however many inches it says on the screen without stretching your work. Once you've done that, your work should be looking something like this. Now you're going to need your 1-inch thick flat elastic, and you're also going to need a measuring tape, and please ignore the state of the measuring tape I'm using. I have since bought a new one. You're going to measure a piece of elastic that measures however many inches it says on the screen, and the elastic is purposely longer than the waistband that we've just crocheted. And then once you have your piece of elastic, we're going to loop it around so that it's in a circle, and you want to overlap the two pieces by ½ inch-ish. Make sure the elastic isn't going to be twisted, and then you're going to need a sewing needle and some thread. And then we're just going to thread the thread into the eye of the needle. So I just like to fold it over so it's slightly easier. Pull through a nice long length, and then you can kind of do it with a double strand of thread. So you can see what I mean. I've pulled it through a long way, and now I'm going to, every time I put my needle through the elastic, it will be a double strand of thread, which is just going to make it stronger and also quicker for us to sew it together. So with those two edges just overlapping by about ½ inch, we're just going to start to sew the pieces together so that we have a continuous loop. Now it doesn't have to be too neat because this is going to be completely hidden, but we just need to make sure that it's as secure as possible and that it's never going to come undone. That is your main thing. And obviously you want to try and keep it as straight as you can, and you don't want any sort of flappy bits, but the actual needlework itself is not, you know, the main focus of this task. So I've just sped it up a little bit for you so that you can get the gist of it. But like I said, it's not about making it neat, it's just about making it secure. And just keep going until you can pull the elastic and it feels really nice and tight. So this is what mine looks like when it's all done. And it's really nice and strong. I'm going to tie these two ends together. So it's a good idea to kind of finish near where you started. And then when you pull the elastic, it should not budge in that middle section. And then yeah, just tie those two ends together and it will be nice and secure. And there we go. So effectively what we're going to do is fold over the waistband, and then we're going to hide the elastic inside that fold. But first we actually do need to join the short edges of the waistband together. So if you fold the waistband over the other way, so the short edges are lined up together, and making sure the work isn't twisted, we're going to join up these two edges using slip stitches. So if you grab your hook, and your working yarn should still be attached, so just put your hook through that loop. We're going to start off by just putting the hook through the other side, so the other edge that we're joining together, right into the outermost stitch, and then you're just going to do a slip stitch. From there we're going to go into the next stitch along, but to make it look more seamless I'm going to go into the back loop only, and then over on the other edge we're going to go into the next stitch along, and then just join them together with a slip stitch, and not doing the slip stitches too tight either. So then we're going to go into the next stitch, but again into the back loop if you want it to look more seamless, then through the other side into the next space and slip stitch. And you just need to repeat this all the way along this edge. As you start to make your way along, it should look something like this. So this is what mine looks like, and this is going to be the wrong side because we have quite a visible seam there. So that's going to be where the elastic is on the inside where we can't see. And then this side is ideally going to be the side that you can see that's on the outside because it's really invisible. Okay, so if you grab your piece of elastic and the working yarn you want to be closest to you, so you can see my working yarn with the loop there is on the piece of fabric that's closest to me. I've got the visible seam on the inside, so it's facing upwards, so that when I fold it around the elastic, it's now hidden. When we join the two edges together, we really want to try and keep it straight, so this part is going to join to this part. Try not to go skew with and kind of on the diagonal. So that's where we're starting from. And just like we did before, we're just going to insert the hook into that stitch. So I've kind of pulled the loop up just so I can see where to go. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch. And then you're basically just going to work into the next stitch. So it would be the end of the next row. You put your hook through, and then the end of that same row, so it's the other end of the same row, you put your hook into on the other side and then join with a slip stitch. And you're basically going to do this all the way around, and it's gradually going to conceal the piece of elastic. One major thing to note in this section is that you really need to do your slip stitches as loose as possible. So after I finished this section and I'd worked all the way around, I tried on my waistband and it was too small because the slip stitches were too tight. And because the slip stitches were too tight, the waistband just would not stretch enough. So these slip stitches that I'm doing are not loose enough. You basically just want them to be as loose as possible. And don't worry if it seems like it's messy or it's going to be too loose, because we'll sort that out afterwards. It's better to be too loose than too tight. And then, sorry, I just thought it was really important to add in some footage of me actually doing it looser, just so you can see that there is quite a big difference there. The stitches are nowhere near as neat and they're a lot looser, but that just means that we're going to get so much more stretch, and the waistband will easily go over your hips and then fit nicely at your waist. And you can see there that the elastic is now trapped inside, it can't escape, and we're just going to continue doing what we've been doing all the way around until you get all the way back to the start. As you go along, if you're unsure whether or not your slip stitches are too tight, just try and stretch the fabric, and if it doesn't stretch, that means they're too tight. When you get towards the end, it will seem like the piece of elastic is too big to fit inside. That is absolutely fine and normal. Just try and squeeze it in and it will work out. Now I just have a few stitches left, so that is the size of the hole that I have left, and we're just still going to carry on doing the exact same thing. Again, ignore my slip stitches because they are way too tight, but you can just prise apart the material just to try and get into that very last stitch, just so that it's completely closed up. Then from here we're going to be starting from round 1. Before you continue, make sure you can fit this waistband up your legs, over your hips, and it will sit nicely at your waist. Okay, so this is round 1 of the hips section. We're going to chain 1, and then you need to evenly spread out however many stitches it says on the screen, and we're going to do that with single crochet stitches. So you're going to work your way around, And to be honest, it might take you a few times to get this completely right, but it's really important because we're setting up for the rest of the pattern. And then I have just noted on the screen, but your total stitch count will be one more than the number of single crochets you're going to do around, because the beginning chain 1 also counts as a stitch. We're working into the slip stitches from the previous round, and you most likely will have to go into some of those stitches at least twice. So, you know, you can do like 2 single crochets in one stitch, then 1 single crochet in the next couple of stitches, and then you'll do 2 again. And just try and evenly spread out those single crochet stitches to the best of your ability. Count as you go, and like I said, it might take you a few turns to get it right. I'm just pointing to the beginning chain 1, so when you finish the round you're going to join with a slip stitch to that beginning chain 1. So I'm almost all the way around. This is what my work looks like, and then I'm just going to demonstrate joining with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 1. So there is the chain 1 that we started with. You're going to join with a slip stitch, and that is round 1 complete. Now for round 2, we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. Remember that beginning chain 2 counts as your first stitch, and we're doing half double crochet stitches this time. So the beginning chain 2 counts as your first half double crochet stitch. Then we're going to go into the next stitch with a half double crochet, and then in every stitch around, we're not doing any increases or decreases, so I will leave the stitch count on the screen as to how many stitches you want to maintain for this round. When you get all the way around, you will join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2, which I'm going to show you in a second. But I just wanted to put it in here that once we're done with this round, we're going to repeat this round 2 until our total work from the bottom of the waistband measures 2 inches. Make sure you don't alter the stitch count at any point when you're doing the round 2 repeats, and then I'll just show you how to finish the round. So that's my last stitch that I've just done there, and then there is the second chain on my beginning chain 2. So you join with a slip stitch to that second chain in your beginning chain 2, and that is round 2 complete. So keep repeating round 2 until your work measures 2 inches from the bottom of your waistband, and once you get there your work will look something like this. Now we're going to start our increases for the hips. So we're starting again from round 1. You can put a stitch marker here if you want to, just to know that this is round 1 of the hip increases, if it makes it easier for you. So we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. This is the section where you're going to need your 4 stitch markers that I mentioned at the start of the video. Now, if you want to mark this round as the start of the round 1 for the increases, then you'll need an extra stitch mark for that. So what you need to do is half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen. So you can see I've just done that there. And now in our next stitch, we're going to do 2 half double crochet stitches into that next stitch. So we're going back into that same one again. This is our first increase, and now we need to grab one of our stitch markers, and then out of the 2 stitches that you've just done into that same stitch, so the increases, we're going to put the stitch marker into the second stitch. So not that one, that's the first one. We're going into the second one, so the last stitch that you did, just insert your stitch marker in there, and we can see it's in the second increase stitch. And now we need to continue on with half double crochet stitches. So half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen. So now you can see there's my first stitch marker. I've just done my next little section of half double crochet stitches, and now we're going to do another increase. So into the next stitch, do 2 half double crochet stitches. Again, grab your next stitch marker, and we're going to place it into the second increase stitch that we did, so the last stitch that you did basically, and this is our second increase. From there you're going to half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen. So you can see there that my second stitch marker is just there on the right, and I've done a nice long length of half double crochet stitches. And so once you've done that, then you need to do your third increase. So you've got 2 half double crochet stitches into the next stitch. Grab your third stitch marker and place it into the second increase stitch, so the last stitch that you did, that's the third increase complete. Then you need to half double crochet in the next however many stitches it says on the screen. And once you've done that, you're then going to do your fourth increase. So again, 2 half double crochet stitches into the same stitch. Place your stitch marker into the second stitch, and then just half double crochet all the way to the end. I'll leave on the screen how many stitches that should be. And then when you get to the end of the round, you're just going to join with a slip stitch to the second chain in your beginning chain 2. So that long section where we didn't do any increases is going to be the front of the shorts. And you can see I've got my 4 stitch markers. They are all on the back side, and the start/end of the round is in the middle at the back. So this is what your work should be looking like so far. So now we're going to go on to round 2 of the hip increases. So we're going to chain 2 and turn our work. And then all we're going to do is just half double crochet in each stitch around. So we're not doing any increases. Your stitch count should stay the same as what is written on the screen. When you get to each stitch marker, you're just going to take the stitch marker out, put your new stitch into the space where the stitch marker was, and then before you continue on, you must make sure you then put the stitch marker back into the new stitch that you just created. And then you just continue on and do the same when you get to each stitch marker. When you finish this round, join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. So I'm just joining with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2, and that is round 2 of the hip increases complete. Now we're going on to round 3. Chain 2 and turn your work. We're going to half double crochet in each stitch until we get to the stitch marker. When you get to the stitch marker, just remove the stitch marker, and in that marked stitch you're going to do 2 half double crochets. So we're going to increase again, and then before you move on, make sure you get the stitch marker, and again you're going to place it in the second increase stitch, so the last stitch that you just did, and then half double crochet on to the next stitch marker. And when you get to the next stitch marker, you're going to do the same thing, making sure that when you put the stitch marker back in, it just goes into the second increase stitch. So you're going to do that for each stitch marker around, and when you get to the end of the round, you're going to join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2, and then you're just going to repeat rounds 2 and 3 once more. So I'll leave the information on the screen for you, and also the new stitch counts. So your work should be looking something like this. Now we're going on to round 6 of the hip increases. So we're going to chain 2 and turn. And then all we're going to do for round 6 is half double crochet in each stitch around and join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. So no increases and no changes in the stitch count. Now round 7 is an increase round, but it's going to be slightly different to the increase rounds we've done previously. So you're going to chain 2 and turn your work. We're going to half double crochet up to the first stitch marker. So go into the next stitch and then in each stitch across until you get to your first stitch marker. When you get to that stitch marker, if you just remove it and then into that stitch that was marked with the marker, we're going to do 2 half double crochets just like we did before. But then when we put the stitch marker back in, we're not going into the second stitch of the increase. We're going into, so not into that one. That's the one we have been going into. We're going into the first half double crochet of that increase. So the second from last stitch that you did. And that's what you're going to do for each stitch marker around. So half double crochet to the next stitch marker, and then when you get to that one, do the exact same thing again, 2 half double crochet stitches in the marked stitch, and then replace the stitch marker back into the first stitch of the increase. Do that for each stitch marker around, and then after the fourth one just half double crochet back to the end of the row or end of the round and join with the slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. Your stitch count will have increased by 4 stitches, and I'll leave the new stitch count on the screen for you. So your work should be looking something similar to this at this point. At this point, we now need to repeat rounds 6 and 7 twice. So I'll leave the information on the screen for you just so that it's completely clear. But just to remind you, round 6 was chain 2 and turn, and then you just half double crochet in each stitch around without any increases, and you join with the slip stitch to begin in chain 2. And then round 7 is the increase round where we chain 2, turn, half double crochet up to the stitch marker, then do 2 half double crochet stitches in the marked stitch, and when you replace the stitch marker, make sure you put it into the first stitch of that increase, and do that for each stitch marker around. And then when you get to the end of the round, just join with a slip stitch to begin in chain 2. So you basically need to do those 2 rounds twice more. So that will actually be rounds 8 and 9, and then 10 and 11. You're repeating rounds 6 and 7. And after you've completed the repeats, so once you've finished round 11 of the hip increases, I'll leave the stitch count on the screen for how many stitches you should now have in the round, including your beginning chain 2. And your work should be looking something like this. Now we're going to go on to round 12. So round 12 is an increase round, and it's going to be the same as the first lot of increase rounds that we did. So basically where we put the stitch marker into the second half double crochet in the increase stitches. So just to be clear, you're going to chain 2 and turn your work. You're going to half double crochet up to your stitch marker. When you get to the stitch marker, take it out, do 2 half double crochets in that marked stitch, and then when you replace the stitch marker back into your new stitches, just make sure you go into the second one, so the stitch you just created. And then you're going to half double crochet to the next stitch marker and do the same for all the stitch markers, and then half double crochet to the end of the round, join with the slip stitch to the beginning chain 2, and your stitch count will have increased by 4. Do excuse the fact I am editing, but after that, basically what you need to do is repeat rounds 2 to 11 one more time all the way through. So you've just done round 12, you're now going to go back to round 2 and repeat rounds 2 to 11, and then that'll be all the increases for the hips done. So go back to this time on the screen and you can basically follow the steps again, and then you'll come back to the point where you're at now. Just don't do round 12 again. You only need to do rounds 2 to 11. This is what your work should somewhat be looking like at this point, and you can actually remove the stitch markers as well. Okay, so now we're going to separate for the legs. Now what you need to do first of all is just slip stitch into the next stitch. So we haven't done any chains, we're just going to go into the next stitch with a slip stitch. And then from there, we're going to make a chain. So I will leave on the screen how many you need to chain for your size. So your chain's going to look something like this. And then where we did the slip stitch and then started the chain, we're going to count along however many stitches it says on the screen for your size. So from where the slip stitch is, the one next to it is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And you count all the way around however many stitches it says on the screen, and then you're going to place a stitch marker. So I've just counted around 99 stitches, and in that 99th stitch I'm just placing a stitch marker there. And then what we're going to do is, with the chain that we created, making sure that it's not twisted, I'm just going to attach the chain with a slip stitch to the marked stitch. And the reason I've zoomed out so far is just because I wanted you to be able to see the whole thing to get the context of it. So I've basically joined the chain to the other side of the shorts. You now need to turn your work so that the stitch marker and the slip stitch you just made are facing you, and then from there you're going to slip stitch in the stitch that's to the left of the stitch marker, and then from there we're going to make another chain, and the chain is going to be the same length as the one you did before, but I will leave it on the screen. And then with that chain, making sure you don't twist it, you're going to join it with a slip stitch to the last stitch of the previous round that you did. So this is where the start and end of my round is, and I'm just going to join with a slip stitch to what would have been the last stitch in the last round that I did. So now we have separated for the legs, and I'll just show you what that looks like in case you need to check it against your own work. That's what the back of the shorts looks like, and this is what it looks like on the front of the shorts. So you've got two chains going across, and you can just see it a bit more clearly there. So they should be completely sort of in the middle of your project, going from the back to the front. And then what we're going to do is our working yarn is kind of on the left side, because that's where we just did our last slip stitch. So from that point we're going to work around the outside of the shorts. That's kind of going to be the outside of your hip, and then you're going to work across this chain, and that will be sort of one round of the legs section, and we're just going to work on that side for now. This side is going to be the other leg, and that is just going to stay as it is for now. We're not going to work on that for the moment. So starting round one of the legs, we're going to chain 2, and then as I just said, working around the outside of the shorts, we're going to half double crochet in the next stitch and in every single stitch around. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like as you get around to the other side where the stitch marker is. So you're going to go into all the stitches up to the chain that we made, and I'll just show you a close-up. So there are no more stitches to be done. I need to go now into the chain that we made. So I'm going into the first chain stitch, and then the second, and I'm just going to work my way along that chain into every single stitch. And I will leave at this point on the screen how many stitches you should have in your round when you finish round one of the leg stitches. Now I will say that if your stitch count is off by maybe 1 or 2, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because it's not going to make the biggest difference, and now we're not doing any more increases or anything, so it won't really matter too much. But this is what it should be looking like. And so you need to work your way back to where you started this round. So we've gone around the hips, we're now working along the chain, continue along that chain until you get back to the start. So I've nearly finished round one of the legs, and I've counted my stitches, and I still have one more stitch to squeeze in. So I'm just going to do it in that very last little loop there. And then to join the round, we're just going to do it as we have been doing so far. So into the beginning chain 2, in the second chain, we're just going to join with a slip stitch. And that's round one of the legs complete. From there, we're going to chain 2 and turn the work. We're going to half double crochet in the next stitch and in every stitch around. So this time we're going along the chain and then around the outside of the hips, back to the start, and then join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. And then after that, all you're going to do is just repeat this round 2 over and over again until you have the length that you want for your shorts. So you just chain 2, turn, half double crochet in every stitch around, and join with the slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. Repeat that around and around. Make sure you turn after each round, and also make sure the stitch count doesn't alter at all through this section. So just for reference, I did a total of 17 rounds for my leg. So obviously if you deviate away from that, the yarn yardages that I suggested at the start are going to be different, but feel free to make them as short or as long as you want to. And the easiest way to know how many rounds to do is to just try them on as you go and see how they feel. Once I've done my 17 rounds, this is what my shorts are looking like at the moment. So that was the front, this is the back. Still got my chain there that we have not touched. So I'm just cutting the yarn and I'm going to fasten that into place, and then it's time to go on to the second leg. So I've got the back of the shorts facing towards me where the start and ends of our rounds have been, and that's the side that we want to attach our yarn. So we've got the stitch marker over here. That side is not the side that we want to attach our yarn to. We want to attach it to this side where we've been starting and ending our rounds so far. We're going to attach it there and then work along the chain first. So we're going to start off by working in the other direction to when we started the first leg. So make a slip knot. And then if you kind of place your work so the stitch marker is on the left and the beginning and ends of the rounds is on the right. And then that's just going to make it easier for you to attach the yarn, because that's how I'm holding my work as well. And this is a stitch that we're going into, so it's kind of next to the chain, and you're just joining that with a slip stitch. So now you should be ready to kind of work along the chain and then around the outside of the hips. So this is round one of our second leg. We're going to chain 2, and then we're going to half double crochet into the first chain that goes across the legs, and that's the unworked chain, and then just into the next one, half double crochet, and of course you're going to work all the way along that chain. So I'm just going into the last chain in that chain 37 or chain 42. Then the next stitch to go into is the one by my left thumb, so it's kind of like the corner stitch. And then once you've done that, you can just go into the next stitch and then work your way around the outer edge. So I'm nearly at the end of the round, and once again I've counted my stitches and I still have one more to squeeze in, so I'm actually going to squeeze it in here. And I think I probably could have got another stitch in the chain section of round one of the legs, but it doesn't matter, I've just put it in here instead so I have the right amount of stitches. Obviously I said before that the amount of stitches doesn't matter too much if you're 1 or 2 out, but because this is the second leg, you do want to try and match it to the first leg, because otherwise you might have one leg bigger than the other. And then I just joined with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. And then we're just going to repeat that. So we're going to chain 2, turn the work, half double crochet in every stitch around, and then join with a slip stitch to the beginning chain 2. Make sure you don't alter the stitch count at all in this section. And obviously as well, the amount of rounds you want to do is going to be the same so that you match your first leg to the second leg. Once you've done that, you can cut your yarn and fasten it into place, and this is what you should be left with at this point. So we need to close up that gap that's going to go where our crotch is. Turn your work inside out, and then I've just placed my shorts so that the waistband is on the right side and we've got the back of the shorts facing towards us. I'm really sorry, I'm really struggling to get my words out today, but basically where that line is, where the start and ends of the rounds were, we're going to kind of continue that line down. That's the only way I can explain, to kind of sew up this gap, and then we'll just work our way round to the other end. I don't know if that makes any sense, but obviously I'm going to show you as well, which is probably going to be more effective. So if you grab your yarn needle and some yarn and just thread the yarn through the eye. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to kind of start off right at the top of the gap, because we don't want there to be any holes, and this is going to kind of be at the top of your bum crack, so you really don't want any holes to be there. Now you can see here that there is a little hole, so I'm just going to go a bit further back with my needle so that
my needle goes across that hole, and then same through the other side. I'm kind of going through 2 stitches so that my needle will pass through the holes, just because there's 2 holes there that are just a little bit bigger, and I don't want them to be showing when I wear my shorts. So now when I pull the yarn, it's going to kind of close up those gaps. And then we're just going to work our way along the next stitch through both sides. But you really want to make sure that you're only going through the top layer of fabric, because there is like another layer underneath. But if you tie that in with this, then you won't be able to wear the shorts. We're going to kind of like work our way around to that, and you'll see when it happens. But I'll just speed this up so you can kind of see what's going on. So it's really simple, and I did forget to mention as well, you can do this with a crochet hook if you would prefer, but I just think this looks nice and neat like this. And then just keep pulling the stitches as you go, and it should start to look something like this. So I've got no gaps and everything looks nice and neat. And then we're just going to carry on working through like a single layer of fabric, and it will bring you round to the other side. And you can see those little holes there as well. I'm going to do the same thing as I did at the start of this section, just to close up those holes. And then once you've gone all the way across, you just need to fasten that into place. Make sure it's nice and tight and it's not going to go anywhere. And then just going back to the start of that sewing section as well, and just fastening that little string into place. And I had another string that was close by, so I just decided to tie them together. And then don't forget to weave in your ends, and then turn your work right side out once you've done the ends.
Well done guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps to support my channel and helps me to know what you guys want more of. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to stick around for more tutorials from me. My next video is going to be a redo of the floor length maxi beach dress, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to tag me on socials. I'd love to see your finished pieces. But that's it from me. Enjoy the rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this. Bye.